All right, let's do our third topic, which is the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. We don't have that much time left. We'll go a little bit over tonight, as I figured we would. But I don't have that much to say. I've watched a little bit of the trial. I did write an article. It was my first hit article in a
I'm
while.
looking forward to the musical.
Yeah,
Rittenhouse.
right, exactly. Yeah. Um, it was my first article in a while that got quite a bit of reads. And my overall take on it is just like the trial itself is a symptom of a collapsing social order.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
the obsession over Rittenhouse himself, to me, is misguided. And like look, when Derek Chauvin was on trial, Derek Chauvin is a much more accountable person than Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse is a 17-year-old kid, a stupid kid who wanted to basically play Batman. Right. I mean, that well, you talked about this like when you wrote your review of Joker, you did this whole thing about how Batman is essentially a fascist. He's a vigilante who decides to, take the law into his own hands to sort of crack down on the bad guys and return order to Gotham City. And he doesn't have any legal permission to do it. He does it outside the bounds of any like constitutional accountability or whatever. And that's what this fucking stupid kid thought, that he could march down the street with his gun and, save the day. A fucking
Hmm.
dumbass,
Hmm.
reckless, idiotic, naive. And turns out it ended up in this very tragic thing happening. Now, the reason I put it that passively is because I watched the videotape. He was chased down by these three guys. They did crack him over the head with the fucking skateboard. They did say get his ass when he was on the floor. He didn't fire a ton of shots, like I don't think there's any first degree murder conviction there. I don't
Hmm.
know if there's probably not any murder conviction there. Unless you say that the very act of bringing that kind of weapon into that situation is a provocative act. I don't know if there are laws on the
Not in
books
this
that would say
country.
that. Right, not in this country. Right. And,
In
and
in
that's
in England, he'd be going away.
in a sane society, you should be apprehended as soon as you're seen. You're walking down the street in the middle of a fucking riot with a fucking Smith and Wesson MP-15. That's it. We take the gun. You give us any resistance at all, we cuff your ass. And it is totally true. I want to be very fair about this. In the video, and I don't even want to go, I'm not even going to show that video because I don't even want any part of that. I will maybe put a link to the video, but I'm not even going to do that. Just YouTube Rittenhouse video and you'll watch it. I ain't going to have no part of putting that up on the stream. No way. But you do see in the video, after he shoots the guys, he gets up and he starts walking, and the cops, because there was obviously 3 gunshots went off, cop cars
Hmm.
start driving towards him, and he's walking right at them with his fucking gun drawn. And he keeps his hands up most of the time, but then he does kind of put his hands down towards the gun to adjust it to put it into his back. If a black kid were walking towards a police car armed like that, he's
Oh
probably
yeah.
shot no matter what he does with his
Oh
hands.
yeah. 50
Definitely,
shots. 50
definitely,
shots.
a black kid puts his hand down and touches that gun. A black kid's hand goes anywhere near
Hmm.
that gun, forget it. He's dead, dead. And so, I'm not saying there isn't a disgusting imbalance in the way that he is treated with the way that a, uh, you know, whether you are African American, even whether a Muslim kid, I mean, it's just it's awful. Um, but but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can throw him in jail for decades for first degree murder or even second degree murder. And also, it doesn't mean that like the future of the country does not hinge on whether this kid gets booked or whether he walks. Just like the future of the country didn't hinge on Chauvin's trial either. Now, the only reason I invoke Chauvin is because Chauvin is a much more accountable actor than Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse is a fucking dumb kid with these like vigilante fantasies in his head. Chauvin was 44 years old. He was a police officer. He's an agent of the state tasked with the responsibility of knowing how to handle tense situations. And he knelt on the guy's neck for 9 fucking minutes. It was clearly cold blooded murder. But I say, even in that situation, to celebrate the victory as this great social victory and this great emblem of social progress, it makes more sense to do that with in Chauvin's case than it would in Rittenhouse's case. But even in that case, to exact vengeance, retribution, punishment on this one man, on this one actor, is not a stand-in for the systemic change that has to happen. That was even true in Chauvin's case, and that's 10 times more as true in the case of Rittenhouse. And so, like, the idea that if this kid gets convicted, there's going to be parading in the streets. Why?
Mhm.
Why? What is won by that? What is won by that?
Well, I mean, from everything that I told you, I only delved
No,
into
Frank, hold
this.
on. Let me just respond to this. Property should not be defended with deadly force. I agree with you 100%. That's why I said, in a sane country, walking down the street with a weapon like that should get you fucking pinched. You should not be allowed to do that. This is not a sane country. This is a Wild West country. This is a frontier country. Um, and so they didn't, can you arrest him for that in this country, given the laws that are on the books? That's the point. And actually, Ryan Grimm made that exact point. He said, to really have a slam dunk case against Rittenhouse, you would have to have laws on the books that say that to bring a weapon like that into a hot situation like that is to forfeit any self-defense claim.
Right.
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 And you would have to have that law on the books in order to be able to prosecute that case.
Right. And we don't. I mean,
Right, we don't, because the country sucks, and that's my point. This whole this whole trial is happening against the backdrop of a collapsing country that is imploding under the weight of its own insanity. That's my whole point. And I actually made that very point in the article. The system that murdered George Floyd is the same system that sparked the Black Lives Matter uprisings in response to it, is the same system that allows for this kid to get his hands on a weapon like that and parade down the fucking street without being stopped by a cop before something terrible happens. And so something terrible happened. And now we're going to have a big fight over it. And if this kid goes to jail, everybody's going to jump for joy about it, this great social victory that's been won. Nothing's been won. Nothing at all has been won, schmuck. It's a fucking 17-year-old kid. Fucking 17-year-old kid who's deluded by an insane culture being propagated by a collapsing social order. So what the fuck is there to celebrate? What stake do we have in the outcome of this trial?
You're talking about subtleties that do not fit the kind of extremely black and white media narratives that people have absorbed over the last several decades. I mean, they've really lost their critical thinking skills. I mean, that's what you really see. Like, people only understand things in these terms of absolute good and absolute evil. Everything is a Star Wars movie. Everything's Avatar. Everything's just, this good, evil. And that's why I told you I didn't even look very much into this story until you wrote an article about it, because I felt those vibes from a distance. Like,
right.
Oh, this is one of those stories. It's one of those. These people think this and these people think that, and neither one of them is really right. It's like I don't even like to pay attention to that, because everything everyone says is stupid on the subject. Whenever you get a story like that, like, everyone's just, it just becomes the mob with the pitchforks and the torches. They're not really thinking it through. And you saw this. If this reminds me of anything, and obviously this is a more serious situation, what happened, but the Covington High School, I was amazed how many people are looking at these 15, 16-year-old kids, and they want them doxxed. They want,
well, this is one of the things
they want them
that
not to
Glenn
be able
Greenwald,
to go to college.
one of the points that Greenwald made
And
when
what
he
was
talked about the
interesting is you had the
study.
Black Israelites in the background actually shouting horrible homophobic stuff, and they had nothing to say about that at all.
Well, look,
if you've ever encountered the Black Israelites, they're something else.
One of the points that Greenwald made is that in the Trump era, and this is a point that, when you're doing an article, you have to be concise. It's an op-ed. You can't go off into these things. But I did think about this, because he talked about in the Trump era, a lot of the targets are people with relatively little power, right? The Capitol rioters are these kind of debtors and deadbeats and losers. And the Covington High School kids, 15, 16 years old, they're fucking assholes, maybe fine, the bottom line is, and to have those people as your target is to exonerate the system that gave rise to them, because there's only so much bandwidth you have. Every minute you're obsessing over whether Kyle Rittenhouse gets what may or may not be coming to him is a moment where you're not out there saying defund the police or reform the police, whatever. If we're going to have a heart attack about the slogan, whatever. But like, that's where the conversation has to go. And the idea that Rittenhouse getting his comeuppance is a stand-in for that is wrong. And don't tell me we can walk and chew gum at the same time. You know what? Because the left can't walk or chew gum. The left can't do a fucking thing. Oh, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Really? When's the last time you accomplished one thing? Never mind two things at the same time. You walk and chew gum at the same time. The fuck out of here with that. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. Okay. The fact of the matter is that this trial is taking up energy that should be directed into putting this whole system on trial. That's what belongs on trial. The system that rendered George Floyd so desperate to the point where he had to pass off a fake $20 bill, the system that allowed a cop to choke him under his knee in broad daylight. Yes, it's better, of course, that Chauvin got locked up than that he didn't. I'm not denying that. But I'm saying, like, is this cause for celebration, for jubilation? What are you celebrating? Look at what's going on. Look at the context in which all of this is happening. This is happening in front of a collapsing society.
Right.
And the reason this is happening is because the society is collapsing. And so whether or not these individual people go free or go to jail and how we feel about that, the bottom line is this whole country is going one way, the wrong way, and it's not turning around anytime soon. And so there's no real cause for celebration or dismay based on the verdicts here, would be my main point.
Sure. Yeah, I've been thinking about buying a house, and one of my hesitations is I don't have confidence in the future of this country. And I was talking to somebody about that.
Nobody said, hold on. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, Russell. I really don't. But I got some heated people in the comments. Elvira says, my kid didn't do evil shit like that when he was 17.
You're lucky.
Well, what's the point? I mean, I don't understand what I don't understand what the point is. Okay, so did you own a gun at 17? I've never fired a gun in my life. Never mind own a gun. I've never even fired a gun in my life.
I didn't grow up in those parts of the country. I grew up in New York, man. You can't get a gun here.
Yeah, I mean, look, Elvira, part of the reason why your kid didn't do evil shit, I'm sure, is because you're not an evil person. You're a good person. You didn't raise your kid to do evil shit. You know, I mean, when you're a fucking 17.
Yeah, I mean, didn't his mother drop him off there?
And he didn't go out and hunt down these three people. The video is very clear. He was patrolling the streets because he thought he was a badass. And these guys ran up to him, threw him on the floor. They screamed, get his ass. They cracked him over the head with a skateboard, and he rolled over, and they came at him, and he shot him. That's what happened. Like, if I can't tell you what happened and have you react to what happened, then what are we even doing? What are we even doing here? Do you care what happened? Do you care what the circumstances? I said he shouldn't have been patrolling the streets. Of course he shouldn't have been. In a sane society, they'd have pinched him right there. But this is not a sane society. This is an open carry, fucking insane, violent, paranoid, and yes, racist society, where there was nothing stopping him from doing that. There were no laws on the book stopping him from doing that. You can tell me where he got the gun. Okay, that's a different issue. The fact of the matter is there was no way for the cops to know in that moment how he got the gun. Did he obtain it legally, illegally? They don't know. They see a guy walking down the street with a gun. Didn't do anything to stop him.
And there's really, as far as I know,
the system allowed for that. Whether he got the gun illegally or not, the system allowed for that.
Yeah, there's no other country in the Western world where that story is possible.
Exactly.
You know, where like the 17-year-old kid's just walking down the street with a fucking military assault rifle. Like, I believe there is no other country in the Western world where you could even do that.
Right. And so my point is, I mean, look, I've made the point a few different times, but anyway, you were talking about buying a house. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just, I can't let comments like that just go without me addressing.
I hesitate because I don't really believe in the future of this country. And it's a very illiquid asset. It's not like buying a stock. You can get rid of that in literally a second, but you can't just get rid of a house if the country goes completely sideways. The person I was talking to said, well, what about England? They lost their empire and the country turned out better. I said, yeah, but England's whole system of government wasn't collapsing. If anything, it held up very well to World War II, and it came out stronger, and the country came out even more cohesive as a society. That's not what's happening here. Like, we're in a failed state situation. This isn't just a question of losing our imperial holdings. This is
Right.
the homeland itself is coming apart. That was never the case in England.
Right. Right.
So you can't say, well, no, we'll withdraw our military footprint and it'll be just like England. Then we'll put that money into universal health care. That's not what's going to happen here. We're going to fucking kill each other. we're going to be, it's going to be a million Kyle Rittenhouses out on the street.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's a civil war. It's a cold civil war that gets hot at certain points. It gets hot, and you look at this, and this is what I wrote in the article: a country that can watch the same tape and see two completely different things, talking about the incident itself, talking about his crying. Did he fake his tears? Did he not fake his tears? Look, I don't know whether he faked his tears or not. What difference does it make whether he faked? Like, I don't know. Am I crazy? Like, how is that meaningful in any way that's not just like television? You know what I mean?
Well, that is what it is. It's television, and that's how people have been trained to process these events. All of this winds up just being red meat to feed the biases of a public that's been systematically set against itself.
Yeah, and that was another point that I made, which is like, why do you think the corporate media, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, Washington Post, why were they so eager?
Fox,
And Fox, but I'm just saying, why were they so eager?
I checked out that coverage too, and it's what you'd expect. It's the flip side of the coin.
Well, the Rittenhouse thing, but I'm just talking about, like, they were so ready to serve up Derek Chauvin on a platter, right? The corporate media was so ready and willing to just rejoice and show the people here, because the conviction of Derek Chauvin was what the corporate media used to perpetuate the narrative that the system is working, right? Justice
that was
has
like
prevailed.
Bernie Madoff. That's why they were all over Bernie Madoff.
Exactly.
They weren't all over the people
because when an
really
obvious murderer, right? Exactly. When an obvious murderer gets
Ponzi
prosecuted,
scheme, that's the guy they wanted to talk about.
Exactly. And when he gets what's coming to him, they can put that forward as an example of American justice at work, right? You talk about defunding the police, the media in unison. That's stupid. That's impractical, right? It's radical. That's why. That's why. Because any systemic critique, they don't want to hear about. What they'll do is they'll throw out an example of a fact where a guy who knelt on a black guy's neck for 9 minutes on camera went to jail for it. And they'll say, see, the system works. He was found guilty.
Right.
Defund the police? No. What are you, crazy? What are you, stupid? What are you, radical? You're going to cost Terry McAuliffe the election in Virginia. We talk like that, right? and so that's the game. That's the game. And this is the game again with the Rittenhouse thing, right? It's all over again. Now, this is not as outrageous an example for obvious. I mean, with the Chauvin thing, there was no question, open and shut case, cold-blooded, first-degree murder, or whatever it was. Was it first degree, or did they get him for second degree because it happened after? Well, whatever. Cold-blooded murder, right? No doubt about it. Right. With this, the particulars of the case are a bit grayer. No, I'm not afraid to say that. I've watched the fucking video. If you watch the video, you have to say that is a grayer case than the Chauvin case. All right. So cancel me if you want. I don't really care. All right. But the fact is that whether it is Chauvin or Rittenhouse, it's what do they call the Joe Manchin and the Kristen Sinema, the rotating villain strategy, right? The rotating villains of the Democratic Party. Now it's Manchin. Now it's Sinema. Years ago, it was, 2009, it was Lieberman, and, go back. Well, it's
Sure.
the same thing.
Well,
The
that
rotating villain strategy here. It's the cops who beat Rodney King. It's
right, right.
then it's Chauvin. Then George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman guilty. Fucking. I mean, that was a horrible injustice where that guy should have gone to jail for what he did to Trayvon Martin. That was what sparked the whole BLM movement. But had he gone to jail, you're saying there still wouldn't Mike Brown wouldn't have happened, right? Tamir Rice wouldn't have happened. I don't buy that. I don't buy that
Sure,
at all. I
sure,
don't think these
sure.
things hinge on
You're right.
certain individuals being made an example of. These things hinge on whether or not the public is going to rally behind meaningful, no bullshit reforms. And that struggle continues no matter what happens to fucking Derek Chauvin, George Zimmerman, Kyle Rittenhouse, right? That's my point. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe wherever you saw it, on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Facebook. We have channels on all three of those platforms. Also, consider helping us create more content by becoming a member at patreon.com/do dissidents, or on Facebook, where you can become a supporter right through our Facebook page and get bonus content every week, as well as call-in access to our live stream shows. Thank you very much for your continued support.